Thanks for joining us for this last in our series of panel discussions. My name is Kevin Lyman, and I'm the Director of Global Thought Leadership at Invesco. Our series so far has covered the emergence of the Global Strategic Intelligence function as a new means for companies to address the threats created by an increasingly uncertain and volatile world. Our final panel will dive more deeply into the tools and technology currently available to assist intelligence teams in their efforts. We'll also discuss how to integrate these tools into a company's wider technology platform and the importance of maintaining the human element. Joining me today from Deloitte are James Cascone, a partner with the Strategic Risk Practice, Dilip Krishna, Global Cortex AI Platform Leader, and from Invesco we also have Marianne Nichols, Global Head of Intelligence and Threat Analysis, and Donnie Lochan, Invesco's Chief Technology Officer. Finally, bringing a broader academic perspective to the discussion, we have John Stasko, Regents Professor at the Georgia Institute of Technology's School of Interactive Computing. Thank you all for joining me. James, I'm going to start with you and ask you to help set the stage for the discussion by providing an overview of the sorts of tools that are currently available to global strategic intelligence teams.
Great. Pleasure to be here. So when it comes to different types of analytics and monitoring tools, there are literally dozens of technologies out there. Some are general purpose aggregators. Others are more purpose tools that can provide specific regulatory or financial or even cyber information. Some of them are well-recognized tools, and there's always a new technology that's being developed with some advanced analytics approaches. So depending on whether someone is interested in just understanding the geopolitical landscape, cyber threats, anti-corruption, anti-bribery intelligence, or a combination of the above, there are different tools that someone can license or open source intelligence that can be leveraged. From an actual visualization perspective, there are several well-known tools such as Tableau and QuickSense, many others that are more statistically based. Many of the hyperscalers, cloud providers have their own tools, graph databases that can be utilized to visualize data. So there's many different options depending on the expertise of the user and the needs from a visualization perspective.
And Donnie, can you talk a little bit about how the tools and the technology, some of the tools and technology that James was just discussing, they may be developed for the global strategic intelligence function in the first instance, but are those tools that can be applied kind of more broadly within a company, or are they really kind of specific to that intelligence function?
No, so I would say the short answer is they can be. What I would advise companies to do is look at as you're building out the strategic intelligence function, think about the attributes of what that team does, right? It's highly skilled. It's out there looking at various data sets, alternative data sets, etc. It's able to curate those, and then it's able to trigger-based sort of disseminate that data out to different stakeholders. So if you were to think about it like that, there are many areas that you could point that to. At the corporate level, as an example, many companies will have a strategy function that is doing strategic scenario planning, as an example, looking out X years ahead of the market. That's one area. Some companies have, I do in technology as an example, a group that's looking at innovation and what's out there next in terms of technology advancements. And that's another area that you can point it at. You know, as we're an investment firm, there's information and insights there that can help our investors, our portfolio managers, when it comes to our core business of investing. For many organizations, there's sales opportunity. You have salespeople, and there's a lot of intelligence there that you can gather that can actually help your sales folks as they're interacting with your customers. So I think you can look at this quite strategically as a capability that you can point at a number of different areas of one's business.
It sounds like then you would want to be thinking about that at kind of the front end as you're kind of onboarding some of these technologies or thinking about them, that you want to kind of be thinking about it more broadly than just with a specific intelligence gathering function, just in sort of the risk and resilience context, but that you want to be thinking about, as you said, how you could kind of point those at other functions down the road. So that's something.
Yeah, because you would be looking at it from a sort of business and a technology architecture. So if you had that in mind, you know, as you're looking at the different data sets, you would architect it in a way that you could easily ingest, you know, more and more different data sets, as an example. Not to get too technical, but you would then design what's called an API layer, an application, a layer that allows you to sort of take those data sets and integrate it into whatever systems you may have, workflow systems, Salesforce, etc. So yes, it's prudent to sort of think more strategically, let's say, and then bake that into the design, even if you obviously just begin with strategic intelligence.
So, John, can I pull you in to maybe bring that wider perspective in talking about kind of the role that the human element continues to play, marrying the technology element with the human element when you're building out a program like this? I know you've done a lot of work on the academic side on this. I'd love to hear kind of your take on all of this from a practical perspective, what people should be thinking about as they're building out these programs.
Sure, Kevin. I think with all of the advances in AI, machine learning, and related technologies recently, it's very, very tempting to just kind of turn things over and let the machine kind of take charge and make decisions. But we see the algorithms aren't perfect. They make mistakes, or maybe they even have biases, favoring a certain type of decisions. So I'm always an advocate for keeping a human in the loop, especially when critical decision-making processes are involved. My own research area of data visualization and visual analytics, I think, is one of the best ways to do that, where it's not just automated analysis of data, but we're also seeing what the data looks like. And there's always a human checking what's going on, making judgments, perhaps steering computations or decisions. And that's a great way to keep people involved and to keep things working as hopefully we expect them to.
Yeah, so it's really, I guess you need the humans to kind of help figure out which questions you should be asking that help you kind of process all of that the data that you're gathering in and whatnot. You may have lots of information, but what's the phrase? Lots of information but no wisdom, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think some of the automated approaches are fantastic when your question is very precise and when you already know it. But many situations arise where you're just given this pile of data and you're not quite sure what to ask or what to look for. And that's a great scenario for visualization tools to assist in that early exploration. And I think they're valuable if they do nothing more than give you really good questions to ask downstream.
So, Marianne, I'm going to turn to you and ask, as somebody who's been on kind of the cutting edge of this, so to speak, standing up this program over the past several years, from your standpoint, what are some of the tools that you found to be kind of most powerful as you've been building out this function? And maybe talk a little bit about the process that you go through in kind of trying new things and figuring out what's most effective.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. So really, it's a variety of different tools to get that kind of broad sense to make your assessment. So looking at dark web sources, social media, local news, discussion boards, pay sites, all that information to be able to assess the risk and impact. We also have a dashboard that we regularly internally for the team monitor and evaluate constantly as far as what tools we're using the most. So which ones are we using for our different products that we put in through our global intelligence briefing, for example. So we're constantly evaluating that as we mature as a team. Sources and vendors and tools that we used a few years ago may not be needed as much as they were then, because again, we keep developing and keep broadening out the function. We also feel that the technology is critical because for such a small team and need to weave, as been mentioned before, through all of this different data and all these different sources, we need to be able to work internally with the business to understand their priorities and couple that with what we're seeing externally. That really helps us to be able to modify and aggregate our information based on requirements. So, topics that would, include geopolitical developments, climate change, reputational risk. So all of that to be able to weed through that information to assess impact.
And I think, you make a good point about being a small and agile team which we've talked about in some of the prior discussions. that makes it critical to be as efficient as you can be. And of course, these tools are all about that, helping you sort through massive quantities of information to really find the pieces that are most relevant to the risks that the company's facing. And I'm curious. I would guess, Dilip, that you may have some similar experience on the Deloitte side, building out your own technology platform and kind of trying things along the way. Can you kind of speak to Deloitte's journey along those lines?
Absolutely, Kevin. What we find with specifically strategic intelligence and strategic risk is there is a lot of volatility. Combine the volatility of strategic risk with the volatility of the technology, and you have an interesting mix. You have requirements for new types of risk, new types of monitoring, new types of visualization, and human in the loop that John talked about, along with huge changes in technology. And what this really drives is a need, and we have experienced this more than once, a need to be very agile in terms of thinking about architectures, but also agile in terms of thinking about vendors, about technologies. Don't get married to a technology. Be ready to use a technology for a while, and if you see something better, the architecture has to be built in a way that the technology can be replaced by something else fairly easily. I think Donnie talked about APIs, and that I think is a way of doing that as well.
I know you're out talking to clients, people out in the field all the time. What are you finding that you're hearing as some of the biggest challenges that others have been encountering when they're building out these technology platforms to support their intelligence functions?
So I think the biggest challenge that we find is really the volatility of the intelligence and risk landscape. This can range anywhere from cyber intelligence to supply chain to insider threat and many other things like that. Not only is there a volatility in the risks themselves, but a volatility in how those risks might interact among each other. Insider threats could be cyber threats. Ransomware could have supply chain implications and third-party implications, all sorts of things like that. So that has direct implications in terms of how the technology platform needs to get implemented and built. There are needs for different kinds of data feeds, needs for different kinds of models to be incorporated in very varied but rapid ways, because often these threats emerge and mature very, very rapidly. So there's a lot of need for things like that. Staying on for a moment on the topic of data, the data formats then can have a lot of different variety as well. Anything from structured data to semi-structured logs and things like that, to even the documents, news information, emails, chats, all those sorts of things. And the ability to incorporate all of that and integrate them is critical to doing this effectively. And finally, the edge. The point that John made about human in the loop is extremely critical. And the user interface and the user experience at the end of all this is really what keeps the risk at bay. And that's probably the hardest part of making this really work effectively.
So thank you. Any last thoughts? I'll throw it over to you, maybe Donnie and Marianne, just having, again, built out one of these functions. Any kind of final lessons that you would want to share with others who may be embarking on this journey?
Yeah, look, maybe what I'll do is give a view just as a user, right, as a recipient from the service that Marianne has, and sort of show how, basically I've leveraged it more and more over time. So initially it was great insights and, give me the insights, as it were. But then you get to a point and you say, can you actually curate this for me in a certain way? And that's the next level. And then when you get that, suddenly it's, well, can you automate it, or can you actually run some additional insights for me, etc. And then finally, you get to a point where you realize the value and you say, oh, can you point it over here and do this for me? Because I have something I'm working on over here that I think you can help. So I think there is a level as a user, and you start to see the criticality and the insights coming out of the group, you start to create more, I'm technical, so I'll just say use cases for it. But Marianne, maybe from your standpoint.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Donnie. Absolutely what we found as we continue to expand the program. Through our global intelligence briefing, we would start getting requests for, oh, I saw that you wrote this on the briefing. Can you delve a little more into that? Because we're actually looking at something similar. Or have you thought about talking about this topic? Because this is a priority for our, part of the business. And that gave us a window into really more about what their priorities were and helped us gain our customer base. So absolutely, the more we understand about what the priorities of the business are, and the more they understand that we are not just a security threat function, we can be more proactive in our analysis, coupling that internal with external information, and really be able to make assessments and opportunities as we can be more proactive.
That's great. So thank you all for your input today. This has been a really interesting conversation, and I think it's a great way to round out our series on the global strategic intelligence function. So thank you to all of the panelists, and thank you to our audience who's been following us on this journey. We hope you've enjoyed our series on the emergence of the global strategic intelligence function, and that you'll share your feedback and any questions you might have. Thank you again for joining us.